next step, we have another David. We are very, very lucky this morning. They are the two Davids of the Singularity. David Orban, chair of the SingularityNET Supervisory Council. David, it's an absolute pleasure to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, David. And our second panelist this morning is Esther Galfalvi. Esther, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you both for all of your work in putting together this incredible summit. So welcome everybody to this panel discussion on the SingularityNET Decentralization Report. This report was fantastic for me. I work in decentralization, but I don't have a history of it prior to SingularityNET. And it really gave me the overview and the picture of what's the history of decentralization, what's the future, what are the different models of decentralization, how is it working in other communities. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion on it between David and Esther, who co-authored it. The report is a document that gives an overview of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, identifies some key challenges and opportunities for achieving effective and fair governance in a decentralized network. This report was published by the Supervisory Council in September 2022. So we're very honored to have two distinguished panelists with us who will share their insights and perspectives on the report and its implications for the future of SingularityNET and other decentralized platforms. Our first panelist is David Orban. David is an investor, entrepreneur, author, keynote speaker, and thought leader of the global technology landscape. He's managing advisor of Beyond Enterprises, a blockchain and AI advisory firm, and he's the chairman of the SingularityNET Supervisory Council, as I've said. Esther, our second panelist, is in the process of finalizing her PhD on digital platform work and the future of work. She was the lead researcher on the SingularityNET Decentralization Report and also the organizer of this summit. So let's get the discussion going. Thank you very much, folks. I'll put questions into the chat in Zoom as we go.
Thank you, Janet. I would like to start also taking advantage of the excellent foundational talk that David Wood gave by connecting exponential technologies with decentralization. The reason why it is very natural to see so many decentralizing technologies emerging now is because they are all driven by exponential technologies. The scaling factors that we have observed in Moore's law are influencing energy through solar, are influencing health, education. Of course, what we are all familiar with are influencing finance with Bitcoin. And there are many, many other uncorrelated sectors that are exhibiting the same, and they are all simultaneously leading to a potential advantage that will be enjoyed by decentralized rather than centralized technologies and industries that take advantage of it. Now, GovTech or RagTech or Polytech, as David described it, can they also lead towards decentralization through technology? And of course, this whole summit is asking itself that very question. How can we evolve? How can we implement, but iteratively improve the technology platforms that give decentralized governance an advantage? It is important to realize that the starting point for this is not the objective of achieving a greater degree of efficiency. As a matter of fact, the very starting point is the principle that we want to achieve a decentralized governance at the cost of assuming, at least initially, a relatively lower efficiency. think about it. A dictatorship can be extremely efficient. The king or the pharaoh or the leader of the military junta just decides this is what all of you have to do, and then everyone goes and says yes, and they go and do it. But the problem, of course, is that these very centralized and hierarchical governance structures can be extremely efficient in going in a wrong direction. And we have seen over the course of history many, many times that previously successful societies declined fatally because they were unable to course correct. Now, in today's environment of a globally communicating and interconnected civilization, it is even more crucial to be able to self-reflect, to measure, and to ask ourselves, are we going in the right direction? And if not, to course correct. This may require tremendous effort, and all the conversations, all the buzz, all the arguments, misunderstandings, the very natural way that a democratic, inclusive, exhilarating, human and humane governance structure is conducting itself, well, that is very much part of what we want to achieve and what we want to improve. Technology makes it possible, both in terms of scale, in terms of complexity, and in terms, finally, of actually achieving something. The fabled past of Athenian democracy is very attractive, but not something that we can or even we should aim to replicate. We have this myth of how much it could achieve, but of course it did that at a cost that today we cannot and don't want to assume. It did that through the cost of reducing to slavery a very large percentage of their population, and it conducted its business by completely excluding half of the population, even from being considered. They are women. There are also other tools that were available before, and now they represent a cost that we cannot and must not assume. In the past, when there were conflicts coming to a very reverberating, critical crisis point, well, we had a blunt but effective tool of war. And when we fought, one would win, the other would be dead, and they would be wrong, and the winners would write history. Today, with tens of thousands of nuclear warheads, we cannot afford to use this blunt tool, even if effective. So decentralized governance is inefficient, it's less effectual than some alternatives, but we still want it. And we are enthusiastic about taking on the challenge of Winston Churchill, who was not just joking when he said that democracy was the worst kind of government except every other kind. He was asking for help. Let's build something even better. And it may have taken us 100 years to realize that now we are up to his challenge. But if we indeed are, then we are actually opening a path for hundreds and maybe thousands of years of further evolution and improvement of our global civilization. So I will now share my screen for just a very short set of hopefully stimulating images of what together with Esther and Penny we achieved in publishing the Decentralization Report. You can find this report online if you go to SingularityNET.io, and then in the menu you pick publications, then you will see it linked, and it is a PDF that I invite you to read, and I hope you will find really useful as it goes through the landscape of various decentralization approaches and efforts and projects, connecting it with SingularityNET itself, and ending with recommendations. The report was prepared by Penny Wong, another member of the Supervisory Council, and by myself, with Esther's crucial help as lead researcher. Penny and I will also be at the closing panel of this event, where we will be talking about the past, the present, and the future of the Supervisory Council. So I invite you to join us in that panel as well. Now, the document that I am not going to illustrate page after page for you today, I again invite you to read it instead, really is there to stimulate discussion and feedback. Your participation is crucial. The team members, both at SingularityNET as well as in the ecosystem projects, are of course extremely talented and passionate. But the broader community is what makes this project exciting. And as we identify challenges and opportunities, your input and your questions are the stimulation we need in order to evolve our understanding of decentralized governance even further. I will conclude with a little tool. I love just taking on new things that can help us. It's a tool that allows you to analyze, with the help of natural language processing and generative AI, documents. And at the URL below, you can actually access the interactive chart that I am now going to show very briefly. In this chart, you can actually not only look at the document word correlations, but you can use it in order to analyze what is being covered, what are the topics, and how do they relate to each other. You can also gain insights on how the structures, sub-networks may be less connected than ideal, or find what are the relations of various concepts, the sentiment of the document as the AI understands it, trends and structure and statistics of all kinds. It is also integrated with generative AI tools so that you can ask your own questions, or you can judge and integrate questions that the AI will bring up about the document itself, basically the AI helping you find what are the questions that you should be asking. So I invite you not only to read the document, but to chew on it, digest it, in order to improve your ability to help us in evolving it further. So as I invite Esther to share the panel with me, I maybe can start asking her, how was it to approach the topic? How did you, Esther, see the landscape of projects as other people in the broader AI and blockchain ecosystem are thinking about similar challenges as those that SingularityNET itself is facing? You're muted.
First of all, it was a fascinating experience to start writing this paper with you, and it was a unique challenge because I'm trained as a kind of classic researcher. So many of the documents that I'm used to looking at are part of general databases, academic literature, and so on. But there is only a very small slice of information about decentralization in the sense of new blockchain innovation variants in the research libraries that I'm used to looking at. So I had to spread my net very far and look at all kinds of resources that I would never really include otherwise in an academic paper. And what I found was an incredibly varied ecology, and sometimes rather hard to understand from an outsider's perspective, of all sorts of attempts and experiments in decentralization, some of them very successful and some of them not so successful.
The challenge of DAOs is manifold, but I think we identified two that are common. The relative lack of maturity in the tools themselves that support the varied needs with features that still need to evolve, both in depth as well as in ease of use. And the second is not only to initiate and catalyze, but then to maintain in time the kind of informed participation that the projects presume as necessary for their continued success as DAOs. How do you feel about the interaction of these two parts? Is there an opportunity for broadening participation by making the tools easier to use, or is it maybe too soon and we should still dig deeper in how the tools themselves should work before aiming to have a broader set of people participate actively, because otherwise that would be an unachievable expectation?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there are different layers to the various issues that people who are trying to start DAOs are encountering. So one of them, as you say, is engagement, and one of the others is the relative immaturity of the tooling. But there are a couple of others as well that are in the mix that make a really big difference to how well it works, how well the DAO functions, and the likelihood of its continued success. And those the other two that I was thinking of, just as you were asking that question, was the coordination and the scalability. Now, you partially addressed the scalability in your question, but the coordination layer of an operation of a DAO is profoundly important, and I think that it's one that is often very much overlooked. the coordination layer is the human element in the DAO, the managing of the human element in the DAO. And so if there is no proper coordination of the different teams, if there's not enough communication between the teams and it's not organized very well, then I think that engagement can drop. And I think that it can be a mistake to scale up rapidly without first ensuring that those structures and mechanisms are in place. And it's very important to remember that those structures and mechanisms are extremely different from the governance layer. They interact very closely with the governance layer, but they are different from the governance layer. And they must be thought about before anything can be implemented on a large scale.
Another further, if you wish, ambitious question is whether it is possible to aim and look not only at the voting about the strategies or financial allocations or other types of high-level decisions of an organization, which in analogy to a more traditional corporation would belong to the layer of the board of directors, but to ask ourselves what could be a new generation of DAOs that are able to analyze and allocate resources and skills to tasks that are leading the way towards achieving specific goals in a more tactical day-to-day manner as well, where the analogy would be that of the executives of a traditional corporation. So have you seen anyone attempting this yet? Do you believe that it is too soon even to think about it?
Are you asking whether the kind of management mechanisms are being given to communities? Is that the question?
Yes.
Or, okay. Do you mean in a in a practical sense? Have I seen it moved into the realm of voting? These kind of management areas, or
let me give you an example of why I am asking the question, because SingularityNET is beautifully positioned here because it lives at the intersection of blockchain and artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, by the way, is not an exponential technology. It is way more than exponential. It is super exponential. What we are seeing is not an increase in velocity with acceleration. We are seeing an increase in the rate of acceleration in the power of AI. That is why the astonishing sets of announcements of new products and capabilities all over the world is so exhilarating and frightening at the same time. I call AI, together with a few others, jolting technologies, where the jolt is the first derivative of acceleration, the measure of the variation of acceleration. And what we are seeing now are AI modules that are able to analyze tasks, break them to subtasks, and then assign those subtasks either to themselves or, if they need to, obviously, to humans that will execute them in their place. So to at least in part answer to my own question, it is already happening. So it should be the case that DAOs and organizations like SingularityNET, who aim to progressively decentralize, should be or ought to be ambitious and embrace this new level of the challenge as well.
So you mean devolve the sort of management layer to artificial intelligence?
The principle, once again, is that, and this has been tested a few times. Fairly famously, Zappos, for example, the e-commerce platform for shoes, adopted holacracy that eliminates a lot of management layers that they believed were unneeded, empowering smaller teams to take decisions instead. And yes, I believe that maybe a future report that you and I will be working on should address how that is possible, what are the tools that could enable that, and then one of those tools, I believe, will be AI, because the human attention necessary for voting on those things would be too precious, and it shouldn't be devoted to that kind of fine granularity decision making.
Right, I understand. So really, this is about the levels at which coordination mechanisms can operate, because it's unworkable and relates to your engagement issue to have every single person in the organization voting on every single decision. It just wouldn't work. It's not possible, and then you would lose people's interest, and it would just turn into a bit of an amorphous mess where often, and you could get into a situation where it would automatically be centralized as well. So it would you'd have a very dedicated small group of decision makers who care enough about the decisions that they're trying to put through that they would be voting on everything, and the people who have skin in the game would also be voting on them. But the way to overcome this is possibly through a combination of wide-scale decision making on large decisions about the direction of the organization and really critical governance decisions, which would then be applied to the entire community. But then there would also be a nested set of teams or decision makers that are local to the kinds of areas that they are concerned with, which I believe is close to the holacracy model. But you can see such models in all sorts of areas. For example, we have much to learn from things like cooperatives, where they are using these kind of coordination mechanisms since well before blockchain arrived.
The work that you did was fantastic, and I am very grateful for having had the chance of collaborating with you on the report. And I'm sure Penny shares that sentiment as well. I am indeed looking forward to be able to continue the work in analyzing and sharing with the wider community our understanding of how the tools and the practices for DAOs and decentralized governance are evolving. I think we are towards the end of our time, and I would like to ask Janet if there are questions from the live stream that we should address.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. That was absolutely gripping and really, really encouraging and inspiring to see the level of commitment, thought leadership, and effort that we're putting into this report from the Supervisory Council. So great job to you both. We actually have, I think, 13 minutes left, so we're not quite altogether running out of time. I think you may have already addressed it in the chat, but Michael Duncan, hi Michael, asks, who measured super exponential growth in AI progress?
Yes. And thank you. I do have more questions for Esther as well, if we have more time and there are no more questions from the audience, but I will also be happy to yield our time to our future speakers and panelists, as long as they are ready, of course, because I know that these events tend to run long rather than short, so I'm happy to be breaking the rule there as well. But back to Michael Duncan's question. The ability of the human body and the human mind to understand exponentials is already limited. We still can. When you throw a ball or when you catch a ball, you are actually instinctively doing all kinds of calculations that take those phenomena into account. But super exponentials go beyond the limits of our adaptability. This is easily illustrated by thrill rides, where originally 50 years ago, or whenever they were born, you would just sit in and the little train would bring you up and down and you would shriek, but it would be quite modest as an experience. If you look at the latest designs, first of all, you see that there's no kind of circle in them. All the curves are contorting in many dimensions. And when you sit down to leave for the ride, your head and neck are immobilized because it would just snap. The ride would literally kill you if you were not protected. And what you are experiencing there is the super exponential of a varying degree of acceleration. Now, another example is rockets, where the rocket takes off and the engine at full throttle is able to increase the acceleration of the rocket because the mass diminishes as the propellant is consumed during ascent. In AI, the Stanford University AI report from 2019 or maybe 18 actually speaks about two ages of AI. One, where it followed Moore's law, and from 2012, they said, oh, it is not doubling every 2 years anymore. It is now doubling every 8 months. But then they didn't think better and they interpolated with 2 lines. But instead, just a few months later, the founder of NVIDIA came out and said, wait a minute, we are seeing AI doubling in power every 4 months. And last year, he said, not anymore. We are seeing AI now doubling every 2 months. So the data points are accumulating and we are seeing interconnected and overlapping techniques and technologies, whether in the way we design our neural networks, whether the hardware that is supporting it, whether it is the type of data that it is being trained on. So ample evidence for this super exponential being at work.
Thank you so much indeed, and I think we're going to want to hang on to you, David, until the end of your allotted time. You're a luminary, and it's amazing to have you here, and as with Esther as well. I have a question myself. So we talked when we met in Dubai recently. I was very moved and shook up by some of your insights and comments about the future with AI. And the one that really stuck with me about decentralization was you said, how can an organization get to be as fit as possible so that it can absorb the inefficiencies of decentralization? Could you expand on that for us a little and explain what you meant by that? I thought it was a brilliant insight.
Yes, and I believe that there are phase transformations in human history where we can fulfill the aspirations and dreams of generations that came before, whose moral ambitions were in the right place, predicting almost a utopian future that we are now living and have the possibility to make real. An example I often make is we are not better people than the Romans. The reason we admire the Colosseum is a wrong reason. It is still standing because it was overbuilt by so many slaves that it wasted all kinds of structural material as well as human lives. So the fact that we are today building flimsier buildings is a good fact. We can rapidly incorporate in the new buildings that don't last 1,000 years the things that in the meantime, 20 years later or 30 years later, we learn. And of course, we are doing them without employing slaves. Once again, not because we are better people, but because we have technology that allows us to employ machines in the place of people. Already 10 years ago, the Times of India published an amazing statistic. I was actually in New Delhi, gave a talk at IIT, and just picked up the paper that day and then took a photo and include it in my presentation. 10 years ago, 98% of the energy in the Indian agricultural sector comes from machines, not from humans in India. And, you know, as a extremely ignorant European, I know very little about India. And when I think about it, the fact that it is already taking advantage of what technology and machines enable us is not the first thing that comes into my mind. So building on that, we now are at the point where, after having recognized that at least most of the countries, that kings are unneeded and maybe not the best choice for deciding what a country should be and should aspire to be, we are now affording ourselves to trust people and to trust them even more. And the naysayers that would be happy to take away voting from those who don't deserve it because they are provably ignorant should be shunned, should be really put in a corner. The onus is on them to find a better system than not the wisdom of the crowds. A very recent, hopefully reproducible scientific result actually pointed out how a group of people that debilitated by alcohol will still exhibit the same level of positive decision making than those who didn't take alcohol, because the wisdom of the crowds overtakes their individual impairment, which is quite amazing. And I hope it will be confirmed, because I do like a glass of wine from time to time.
Well, thank you very much. I felt we had some great wisdom after a glass of wine in Dubai, that's for sure. Definitely, there was nothing debilitated there whatsoever. Thank you so much, David, for illuminating answer. Right, David Wood has asked, and I think this is a great question too, and this might be for Esther for the research, or either of you. What are the best recent examples of holacracy persisting over several years, if indeed there are any?
So there are some examples. There's Lab Co-op, which is a tech incubator, but it's very difficult to tell internally how successful companies that employ holacracy are. I understand why you've asked the question, because it's quite possible to get swept up in the hype about a new kind of management system, and that's very much what happened, I believe, with holacracy, that there was an explosion of excitement about it on the web, and then lots of companies decided to implement it and couldn't make it work for some reason. Maybe it wasn't integrated properly, or it was done for the wrong reasons, or it simply wasn't compatible as a model with the organization. But having said that, it also seems like many of it sort of turned itself into a pyramid scheme a little bit, because there were suddenly a rash of organizations that sprang up that wanted to help other companies implement the holacracy system. So there was a kind of explosion of that as well. So it's sort of unclear in some cases how useful it actually was to organizations. But it's also important to remember that the holacracy model doesn't have to be implemented wholesale. It can be used as an inspiration, or the nested structure can be used partially. So it's not necessary to say for the whole company, we are taking holacracy and doing that and nothing but that.
Well, and I'd actually add to that, thank you. And I'd say that at SingularityNET, our pod structure is drawn heavily on inspiration from holacracy, and it's been in place for almost 2 years and seems to be working pretty well, I would say, as a good balance between traditional management, but very, very largely decentralized management ethos, approach, and structure at SingularityNET. Thank you very much. Now, War1231 has asked, and David, possibly you've read this already on the YouTube and you're ready for an answer, but he said, NFTs and creative industries, capacity building, and everything about circular economy and serious innovation processes as a prelude to the question, which is in development countries, how to accelerate this.
In the 80s, there was a report by one of the top consultancy firms that concluded that Africa is never going to have a phone system because there isn't enough copper in the world to lay down the cables and connect Africans to each other. And of course, today we know that technologies allow leapfrogging, and everyone in Africa now has a phone, but it is a mobile phone, no copper cables required. And even when there are cables, they are made of fiber optics. So once again, no copper. This example, I think, shows that those countries that didn't adopt certain technologies shouldn't fear. They have over and over shown themselves, and as well as everyone else, that there are new opportunities. Another example is what used to be called the Minitel in France, that used to be a character-based television-connected precursor to the World Wide Web. And a lot of people were admiring the French. Oh my God, how can we adopt this? And we didn't need it to. Technology actually moved, and everyone is now using something that is way better than not what the Minitel has been. So there are new technologies and new principles. The question touches upon very important concepts of sustainability, which again, in a globally interconnected world, is not optional anymore. When Europeans were despoiling continent one after the next, and they would just move on and keep going, they didn't need to care. They would just destroy everything. We ran out of continents that we can despoil. We have to take care of our environment and ourselves because we are too precious.
Well, that would be a beautiful note to wrap up on. And we do need to wrap up. But I do have one great last question. If we could have a super quick lightning answer from BCM Strategy Inc., who says, am I correct that the structure you propose would effectively do away with elections, specifically tech-enabled direct group decision-making without delegating authority to an elected official?
No, elections must continue. Actually, they will likely to increase in frequency. I admire the Swiss referendum system. They go and vote on so many things. It is wonderful. However, if we have an election 10 times a day, that is not for humans. I want to delegate to my AI representative voting for me, double checking, treble checking, and improving and evolving what it does. But humans must participate.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. I'm a big fan of humans and AIs working together in harmony in the future. And with a tailwind, that's what we shall be bringing about in SingularityNET with the Singularity. So David, Esther, thank you both very much for your tireless work for SingularityNET and for such a illuminating and inspiring discussion this morning.